In late September of the fourth year of Qian Hoa, an unusual cold spell swept through the northern frontier, carrying bone-chilling cold from the eternal snow peaks. The Vonglin mountain range, known locally as Heaven's Gate, due to its treacherous height, was submerged in a sea of dense fog for 3 days and nights. This is a land that even the most experienced woodcutters fear to tread, due to rumors of ravines that swallow people and trails that change direction after every rain. A group of 15 hunters, led by a 60-year-old elder with a scarred face, had been lost in the old forest at the foot of Vonglin Mountain since the sun began to set. They were the strongest men of Thankei village, specializing in hunting wild beasts in exchange for salt and cloth. But now, the confidence on their faces had vanished, replaced by looks of confusion and anxiety. The familiar trail they thought they knew by heart suddenly vanished under a thick layer of rotting leaves. Surrounding them were only black ancient trees, reaching up like bony fingers scratching the gray sky. As darkness fell in the blink of an eye, a torrential forest rain poured down. It was not a cool summer shower, but heavy, freezing raindrops that felt like needles piercing the skin. The sound of rain falling on the dense canopy created a chaotic roar, drowning out the calls of those in the rear. 15 people huddled together, trying to shield the torches that were dying out from the water. The cold rose from the ground, seeping through their thin raincoats, making the teeth of the young men chatter violently. At the moment of greatest despair, a bolt of lightning tore through the night, illuminating a corner of the forest for a brief moment. That blinding white light revealed a strange architecture perched precariously on a vertical cliff, about 300 steps from where they stood. It was not a cave or a woodcutter's hut, but an ancient pagoda with curved tiled roofs covered in moss. The guide narrowed his eyes, peering through the white curtain of rain. Strangely, in this desolate and dangerous wilderness, why was there such a magnificent temple? There was no stone path leading up, no three-arched gate to welcome. The temple seemed to grow out of the barren limestone cliff itself. In the moment the lightning flashed a second time, they glimpsed a red lacquered wooden sign with gold gilding that had mostly peeled off, leaving only 3 faint Chinese characters, Koam 2, Ancient Nunnery Temple. Although a vague uneasiness rose in their hearts, the cold and hunger left them with no other choice. The whole group silently clung to tree roots, climbing over slippery rocks to advance toward the temple. The closer they got, the thicker and more suffocating the air became. The scent of incense wafted somewhere amidst the smell of mud, but it brought no sense of peace, instead evoking the chill of ancient tombs. When the hand of the first hunter touched the heavy ironwood gate of the temple, a deathly silence descended. The sound of rain seemed to fade, giving way to the creaking of the door slowly opening, though no one pushed it. 15 soaked people stepped over the knee-high threshold, entering the large Bat Trang brick courtyard. The first strange thing that struck their eyes was not ghosts or demons, but an inexplicable dryness. Although the forest rain was screaming outside, pouring down like a waterfall, inside the temple walls, the brick floor was only slightly damp, as if an invisible dome shielded this place from the wrath of heaven and earth. The atmosphere inside Koam 2 was thick and stifling, in stark contrast to the biting wind outside. The smell of moldy, rotting wood mixed with old lime mortar assaulted their noses, causing some young hunters to cover their mouths to suppress coughs. Under the flickering light of the relit torches, the scene of devastation appeared clearly. 2 clay guardian statues stood tall on either side of the aisle, their heads missing. Their bodies cracked open, revealing the black bamboo frame inside like human ribs. Spiderwebs stretched from the rafters to the floor, thick and gray like hanging funeral shrouds. A slight touch would send dust flying blindly. The old guide signaled everyone to stop before the 3 steps leading up to the main hall. He narrowed his eyes, peering into the deep darkness ahead, his right hand unconsciously gripping the handle of his jungle knife tightly. The main hall doors had been removed long ago, or had completely rotted away, revealing the pitch-black space inside. No one dared to speak. Their breathing became heavy and distinct in the absolute silence. Is anyone there?" A middle-aged hunter called out, his trembling voice breaking the tense atmosphere. Answering him was only a dry echo bouncing off the cold stone walls, sounding like the giggling of someone hiding in the darkness. There were no monks, no guards. This temple had clearly been abandoned for at least a few decades, with wild weeds growing through the cracks in the floor tiles. However, when the torchlight of the leader illuminated the far end of the main hall, the whole group froze in place. Goosebumps rose in waves on their arms. A cold draft ran down their spines, making their limbs numb. On the Buddhist altar covered in a thick layer of dust, where Buddha statues were leaning askew, a large black bronze incense burner stood firmly in the center, and planted neatly in that cold ash were 3 dark red incense sticks. The tips of the incense were still burning bright red. A thin white stream of smoke rose straight up, unmoved even though the wind from outside occasionally blew in. The scent of agar wood radiating from those 3 sticks was eerily fragrant, completely overpowering the surrounding smell of mold. It was intense and sweet, like the smell of white tuberoses often found in funerals, not the pure scent of a Zen monastery. The guide stepped closer, bending down to examine the base of the incense. The layer of fallen ash at the foot of the incense burner retained its shape, proving no one had just stood there, but the length of the incense sticks showed they had been lit less than half an hour ago. Exactly when the group started seeing the temple from afar. Who lit them? And where were they hiding in this cramped, rotting space? Bewildered eyes began to dart around, scrutinizing every hidden corner behind the broken Buddha statues, but they only saw the thick darkness staring back at them. By the second watch, the wild forest rain outside began to subside, leaving only the sound of water dripping from broken tiles onto the brick courtyard. The hunters, having exhausted their strength fighting the cold and initial fear, began gathering rotten wood fragments from window frames and broken table legs to build a fire. The fire flared up in the middle of the main hall, yellow light dancing on the damp-stained walls, casting the long, distorted shadows of 15 people up to the pitch-black ceiling. The 3 strange incense sticks on the burner had burned out at some point, leaving 3 glowing red dots of ash that slowly faded into darkness. However, that intense scent of tuberose did not dissipate at all. It swirled around, clinging to clothes, creeping into every breath of the intruders, making the dry rations in their mouths taste bland and bitter, although their stomachs were growling with hunger. Most people only ate a few bites and then gave up, an indescribable nausea rising in their stomachs. The exhaustion of a long day struggling with the old forest finally defeated their vigilance. 13 hunters curled up in their still damp raincoats, lying close to each other around the fire for warmth. Labored and intermittent snoring began to sound. Only 2 assigned guards remained sitting opposite each other across the fire. A middle-aged man named Ba Ho, with extensive jungle experience, and a young man on his first long hunting trip. The surrounding space sank into an absolute silence that was absurd. Normally, after a heavy rain, the old forest would be noisy as a broken market with frogs calling mates, crickets chirping, and insects buzzing. But tonight in this place there was not a single sound of life. No night birds, no wind whistling through leaves, even the sound of running rats was absent. That silence was heavy as a rock crushing the chest, making one feel as if eardrums were being covered by someone. The young man sat hugging his knees, eyes dark-circled from sleepiness but daring not close them. He stole a glance toward the Buddha statues in the dark corner. Under the flickering firelight, those peeling wooden faces seemed to be changing expressions. Earlier he saw the guardian statue glaring angrily. But now, as the fire cast a shadow to the side, the statue's mouth seemed to curl up into a grotesque smile. "Uncle Ba," the young boy whispered, his voice so small it was almost swallowed by the vast space. "Do you see those statues looking at us?" Ba Ho threw another piece of rotten wood into the fire, sending ash flying everywhere. He didn't look at the statues but glued his eyes to the fire, which was turning a strange blue as it burned the old paint on the wood. "Don't look around," Ba Ho replied curtly. but the hand holding the stick was trembling slightly. In places like this, what you don't see doesn't exist. What you see will see you. The warning wasn't finished when the fire suddenly sizzled and weakened significantly, as if blown by someone. The temperature in the main hall dropped abruptly. The sleeping men began to curl up unconsciously, some muttering meaningless words. In the thick darkness surrounding the weak circle of firelight, a faint clicking sound rang out, like sharp fingernails scratching lightly on wood somewhere on the soaring ceiling. The night shifted to the third watch. The darkness now seemed to have weight pressing down on the chests of those awake, making every breath labored. The fire in the middle of the main hall was just a weak layer of glowing embers, the faint, sickly red light not enough to dispel the night waiting to swallow everything. At the moment of transition between night and day, when yin energy is strongest, a sound rang out, shattering the deadly silence. Bong, a temple bell tolled. It was not the clear, echoing bell sound from above, often found in temples. This bell sound was dull, heavy, and gloomy, like a sledgehammer hitting a cliff or metal groaning deep underground. It did not spread out into the vast space, but rebounded inside the four walls of the main hall, bouncing back and forth, making the eardrums of Baho and the young man ache. Baho stood up abruptly, gripping the jungle knife so tightly his knuckles turned white. He remembered clearly when the group passed the front courtyard at dusk. The ironwood bell tower on the left had collapsed long ago, the large bronze bell lying forlornly on the ground, broken in two and strangled by vines. So where was this bell sound echoing from? Bong, the second bell rang, this time sounding closer, clearer, carrying a shock force that made dust from the rafters fall down onto the hair of the two guards. The young man's face drained of blood, lips trembling, wanting to scream, but his throat was stiff as if strangled by someone. He backed away, tripped over a log, and fell onto the cold brick floor. Just as the echo of the third bell ended, leaving a vibrating space, another sound began to rise. Tuck, tuck, tuck. The sound of a wooden fish temple block. It came from right behind the largest Buddha statue in the center of the main hall, where the wooden door leading to the rear palace had been sealed with crossed wooden planks and rusty nails. The wooden fish sound was neither fast nor slow. It was steady, dry, and terrifyingly emotionless. Beat by beat, it knocked on the listener's mind, like the ticking of a clock counting down to death. What made Baho's spine go cold was its rhythm. It was too precise, too mechanical, unlike anything created by human hands. Humans, when striking the wooden fish, would vary in strength and speed depending on breath. But this sound maintained the exact same volume and tempo, not off by a hair. Tuck, tuck, tuck. The sound silently crept through the rotten wood cracks, crawled on the brick floor, and entered the ears of the sleeping hunters. Although the sound was not too loud in this quiet space, it became strangely ear-piercing. The air in the main hall suddenly became freezing like an ice cellar. Baho's breath puffed out white smoke even though it was not winter. The last glowing embers of the fire suddenly flared up into a sickly blue flame and then extinguished completely, leaving the entire main hall submerged in total darkness. Only the sound of the wooden fish continued steadily, and now it seemed there was a murmuring sound mixed between the beats. In the darkness, thick as ink spilling over the main hall, the sleeping hunters were awakened one by one, not because of noise, but because of the cold. A bone-chilling cold, not like mountain night mist, but like someone opening an ice cellar door, or worse, pressing cold slabs of meat against their bare backs. 13 people scrambled up in blind panic. The sound of knees hitting the brick floor, clothes rustling, and stammered questions rang out chaotically. Someone tried to use flint to rekindle the wood, but strangely the sparks that flashed were instantly swallowed by the darkness. Dry wood wouldn't catch fire. The flint was cold, as if the laws of nature were completely disabled in this space. And then everyone fell silent simultaneously as they realized the sound enveloping them. Thud! 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 The dry wooden fish sound from before was no longer alone. It was now accompanied by dozens, even hundreds of voices joining in one rhythm. The chanting began to sound. It was not the light, peaceful sound often found in village temples on the full moon. This sound was so low it shook the brick floor beneath their feet. It was guttural, muddy, sounding like wind whistling through limestone cracks or a broken beehive echoing from deep underground. Those voices blended into a thick block of sound, no pitch, no melody, just a long stream of strange, distorted, and meaningless syllables. What? What are they reading? A young hunter whispered, voice choked with fear, hands clutching his head as if to stop the ghostly sound from drilling into his brain. No one could answer. The language in that chanting was not Sanskrit, nor Han, nor Nom. It was a series of rattling sounds like dry bones hitting each other, sounding both ancient and evil. The most terrifying thing was its rhythm. Humans, when chanting, need to take breaths, need pauses to inhale. But this murmuring lasted continuously, endlessly, without a single break, as if those making the sound did not need air to live. 15 humans huddled together into a trembling mass of flesh in the pitch-black main hall. They couldn't see each other, but they could feel the erratic heartbeats and rapid breathing of the person next to them. The intense tuberose scent from earlier now transformed, becoming harsher, fouler, mixed with the fishy smell of young mud and old mold. The chanting grew louder, from murmuring to echoing, bouncing off 4 stone walls, making everyone's eardrums ache. It felt like the chanters were not far away, but standing right against the wooden partition of the rear palace, only a few handspans from their backs. Even the old guide felt the floor beneath his feet shaking violently with each beat of talk, 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 as if something giant was squirming, wanting to break through the ground right under where they sat. "We have to get out of here," Baho shouted, trying to drown out the ghostly sound invading his mind. "Right now!" But just as he finished speaking, the chanting suddenly changed pitch. From low pitch, it shot up high, ear-piercing and sharp like metal scratching glass, causing everyone to cover their ears tightly and scream in pain. The ear-piercing screech suddenly ceased as abruptly as it began, leaving a vibrating, buzzing space in the heads of the hunters. Instead, the chanting returned to its original low, muddy pitch, murmuring, steady, but now sounding clear as if emitting right behind their backs. Baho, the most weather-beaten man in the group, was the first to regain his composure. He realized that sitting still waiting in the dark now was no different from waiting for death. He hurriedly grabbed the remaining resin-soaked torch in his luggage bag, striking the flint continuously. It wasn't until the 10th time that a weak flame flared up. But strangely, it was not warm orange-yellow, but burned flickeringly with a pale blue light, only enough to illuminate about 3 steps away. He signaled the 2 strongest hunters in the group, one named Asung and one named Alu, to go with him. 3 men gripped their weapons, cold sweat pouring like a bath, tiptoeing toward the wooden partition separating the main hall and the rear palace. There, the talk, talk, talk wooden fish sound continued, steady as the heartbeat of a sleeping giant monster. The closer they got to the wall, the stronger the stench became. It was no longer just the smell of mold, but the smell of rotting flesh, of dead rats forgotten in dark corners, mixed with the sweet scent of incense, creating a mixture that made their stomachs churn with nausea. When only about 2 steps away from the rotten wooden door, Baho raised his hand to signal a stop. Through the large gaps carved by termites on the wooden wall, a strange light was beaming out. Not the pitch darkness they imagined. Inside the rear palace, which should have been sealed and desolate, was brightly lit. The 3 men held their breath, peering through the door cracks. The scene inside made the blood in their veins feel like it froze. The rear palace was much larger than the main hall outside, and unusually clean. No dust, no spiderwebs. Along the 2 walls were hundreds of candles as thick as arms burning fiercely. But their flames were not red, but a deep blue-green, cold and ghostly, emitting a deathly light illuminating every corner. Under that green light, the shadows of dozens of people were kneeling prostrate on the polished black stone floor. They wore ash-gray robes, old and tattered, heads bowed to the ground, hands clasped before chests in a posture of extreme worship. No one moved, no one budged. only their shadows cast long on the white limestone wall danced madly to the rhythm of the invisible wooden fish. Are those people or ghosts? Alu whispered, his voice trembling so much he almost bit his tongue. Baho did not answer. He narrowed his eyes, trying to look closer at those kneeling backs. There was something very wrong. The shoulders of those people sloped abnormally, and under the tattered robes their exposed flesh was gray, dry as old tree bark. And then he saw the thing they were worshipping. Not a Buddha statue nor an ancestral tablet. On the highest altar, the most solemn place of the rear palace, was a pitch-black, slimy mass of flesh, big as a buffalo bull, slowly pulsating with breath. Baho swallowed hard, feeling as if a red-hot piece of iron was stuck in his throat. The black mass of flesh on the altar kept pulsating and contracting. Every time it sucked in, it emitted a wet, slimy, hissing sound like footsteps wading in mud. From the holes on its rough surface, a pitch-black liquid oozed out, dripping onto the stone floor, creating pools of fluid reflecting the green candlelight. Just as the Sung was about to turn his head to signal a retreat, the chanting in the rear palace suddenly changed. If before it was the low, muddy murmur of a broken beehive, now that sound became sharp and piercing to the brain. Meaningless syllables were stretched out, twisted, sounding screechy like fingernails scratching hard on a stone slate, or rusty metal rubbing together. It was no longer human voices. It was the cry of hundreds of wounded wild beasts, howling together in extreme agony but being strangled. Screech! 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 The sound of teeth grinding loudly rang out amidst that chaotic soundscape. Loud enough for Baho to hear from outside the wooden wall. He shuddered, realizing that sound was coming from the very people kneeling on the floor. Their lower jaws were trembling violently, slamming against the upper jaws so hard it seemed teeth and bones were about to shatter. But the most horrifying scene was not in those kneeling corpses, but on the 4 white limestone walls surrounding the rear palace. Under the flickering green candlelight, the black shadows cast on the wall began to have a life of their own. At first, they were just black streaks mimicking the kneeling human form. But when the chanting became ear-piercing, those shadows began to twist and contort grotesquely, while the subjects, those in gray robes, remained kneeling motionless like stone statues. Their shadows on the wall slowly stood up. Alu dropped his jaw, eyes bulging as if popping out of their sockets. He saw the shadow of the guy sitting closest to the door stretching, its neck extending absurdly long, winding like a giant cobra. The shadow's arms grew longer, fingers turning into sharp claws curved like scythes. Then the unbelievable happened. Those shadows detached completely from the base of the wall. They were no longer attached to the heels of the kneeling people. They crawled on the vertical wall, moving agilely like giant jet-black geckos. Dozens of black shadows crawled and overlapped each other, creating a chaotic black mess covering the wall, obscuring even the light from the candles. They were no longer looking toward the altar. Suddenly, all those crawling shadows stopped simultaneously. The pitch-black heads, faceless, slowly rotated 180 degrees. They were staring straight at the rotten wooden door crack, where the 3 hunters were hiding. Even without eyes, Baho felt the cold, evil aura and frenzied hunger shooting straight at him. A feeling of being hunted invaded his mind, stronger and clearer than any encounter with tigers or leopards in the deep forests. The chanting abruptly vanished. Space fell into absolute silence for a split second. Then a long, sharp screech rang out from the shadows on the wall themselves, tearing the eardrums of the 3 men frozen in terror. The ear-piercing screech from the shadows on the wall, like invisible knives piercing eardrums, caused Alu, the youngest hunter in the group of 3, to snap. The fear accumulated since early evening exploded into uncontrollable panic.
Ah! Help me!
Alu let out a blood-curdling scream, tearing through the silent night. He threw away his weapon, flailing his arms wildly, then backed away, tripping over Baho's leg, causing all 3 to lose balance and tumble onto the hard brick floor. The moment the scream ended, the wooden door separating the rear palace, already rotten and full of termite marks, suddenly vibrated violently. A freezing wind blasted out from inside like a storm, blowing wood chips and dust into the faces of the three hunters. Bang! The two heavy doors popped off their rusty hinges, crashing onto the floor with a deafening sound, shaking the entire ancient temple. Dust rose thickly, obscuring the view for a moment. Baho coughed chokingly, trying to prop himself up, his other hand groping to find the torch that had been thrown far away. His heart pounded in his chest, waiting for dozens of gray-robed monsters to rush out and tear him apart. But there was nothing. When the dust settled and the flickering blue torchlight shone inside, the scene before them left Baho and Asung dumbfounded. The rear palace was completely empty. No hundreds of green candles, no gray-robed kneelers, no black shadows crawling on the walls, and absolutely no black slimy mass of flesh on the altar. The vast room was bare with 4 damp limestone walls covered in green moss and mold. The floor was covered in a layer of dust an inch thick, marked with rat footprints but no traces of dozens of kneeling people. The air was so cold and silent that their own heartbeats became noisy.
It's empty.
Where are they? Asung stammered, eyes darting around suspiciously. Could what they just saw through the crack be just a hallucination? Baho swallowed, slowly raising the torch, stepping over the broken door to enter inside. The faint light cast upon the 3-tiered altar at the end of the room. There, 3 large jackfruit wood Buddha statues were sitting in meditation. The once brilliant vermilion and gold gilding had peeled off almost completely, revealing the pitch-black wood core inside. But the horror lay not in the age but in the faces of the statues. All 3 statues had been brutally gouged by someone or something. The gentle eyes of the Buddha were gone, replaced by 2 deep, pitch-black hollow sockets like bottomless pits. The mouth was also gouged wide, jagged with wood splinters, forming a mouth gaping in a scream of agony rather than a smile of salvation. Baho moved closer, the fishy stench assaulting his nose 100 times stronger than before. He shone the torch close to the face of the middle statue. From those 2 empty sockets, a black liquid thick as tar was slowly oozing out. Drip, drip. The black drop hit the altar, shattering and splashing. It was not tree sap nor accumulated rainwater. It smelled of stale blood but had the sticky viscosity of swamp mud. That stream of black tears flowed down the cracked wooden cheekbones, over the gouged mouth corners, dripping onto the floor, creating patchy black pools. And when Baho looked down at the statue's feet, he saw that under the thick dust, the floor had been soaked in that black liquid for some time. It didn't flow from the statue, but seemed to be pushing up from cracks in the floor bricks, as if this temple was built on a black vein of the earth. Suddenly, from inside that deep gouged wooden mouth, a soft sound emerged. Not chanting, but the sound of breathing. Heavy breathing sound. The wooden statue was breathing. Before the wheezing breath from the damaged wooden statue could finish, a cold whirlwind rushed in from somewhere, blowing out the torch in Baho's hand. Darkness fell as fast as a cut, swallowing the 3 men in the rear palace, reeking of fishy blood. And then hell rose up. Ah! The low, steady chanting from before had disappeared completely. Instead, tens of thousands of tragic screams rang out simultaneously from all directions. Not only from the inanimate wooden statues, but the sound seemed to come from the floor tiles, the main pillars and the pitch-black ceiling. It was the cry of the executed, the weeping of starved children, the moans of the dying elderly, all mixed together into a frenzied storm of sound, drilling deep into the brains of the living.
Run fast!
Baho roared, his voice lost in the sea of chaotic noise. He groped in the dark, grabbing Alu and Asung by the collars, dragging the 2 paralyzed men back toward the main hall. Just as their feet touched the wooden step leading down to the outer hall, a series of terrifying banging sounds rang out.
Bang, bang, bang!
The wooden windows surrounding the temple, originally rotten and shaky in the wind, suddenly seemed imbued with an invisible strength. They slammed shut simultaneously with terrible force, creating deafening explosions like cannon fire. Lime and mortar dust fell from the ceiling like heavy rain. In the main hall, the remaining 12 hunters huddled together like chicks facing a hawk. They covered their ears tight, eyes squeezed shut, mouths muttering prayers to ancestors, but that ghostly screaming still crept through their fingers, drilling into their brains. "Main door, look at the main door!" One person screamed in despair. The large ironwood door, inches thick at the entrance, the only connection to the outside world, was slowly closing. No wind, no one pushing. Those two heavy doors slid on creaking hinges, slow but determined, like the jaws of a giant monster closing to swallow its prey.
No, don't close!
The two fastest hunters dashed forward, intending to use their bodies to jam the door gap, but they were a step too slow. Bang! The sound of the door closing echoed like thunder right in front of their noses, locking the only way to live. The whole temple shook violently, dust flying blindly. Immediately, the air inside became thick, suffocating to the point of being unable to breathe. Pressure skyrocketed, making everyone's eardrums ring. The worst thing happened right after that. The small campfire in the middle of the main hall, the only remaining source of light and warmth for 15 people, suddenly puffed out without any warning sign. No glowing embers, no smoke, it died out as if it never existed, leaving absolute blackness covering everything. In that dense darkness, the tragic screaming suddenly ceased, returning a silence 1,000 times more terrifying. But that silence did not last long. From the 4 dark corners of the temple, the sound of bare feet began to ring out. Plat, 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 wet slapping sound. Not the footsteps of the 15 of them. It was lighter, faster, and wetter. The footsteps ran around, ran on the walls, and even ran upside down on the rafters right above their heads. The darkness in Koam 2 now was not merely the absence of light. It was thick, heavy, and sticky like tar, clinging tightly to the flesh of 15 desperate humans. In that murky space, all their senses were pushed to the extreme limit, making fear more tangible than ever.
Don't separate, back to back!
Baho's hoarse scream rang out, but was immediately swallowed by strange noises. The plat-plat barefoot sounds no longer ran around the walls. They had swooped down to the floor, mingling amidst the chaotic crowd. One could not distinguish between the footsteps of panicked teammates and the footsteps of uninvited guests. Suddenly, a young hunter standing at the outer edge of the circle shuddered violently. A cold, slimy hand, as if just pulled from a swamp, slowly pressed against his nape. Long, stiff fingers like dry twigs began to grope the ear, then crawl down to the throat. Who is that?" he stammered, trying to brush that hand away. But when his hand touched the other hand, he screamed in horror. That was not a human hand. It was cold as ice, flesh soft like rotting meat, and it had only 4 fingers. At the same time, chaos spread to the whole group. Screams rang out continuously.
Let me go! What is this sticky stuff all over my back? Someone is grabbing my leg, dragging me! Stop breathing in my face! Get away!
In the darkness, the invisible guests began to tease their prey. Cold hands groped faces, stroked hair, or slipped inside shirts. A strong stench rose up, assaulting everyone's noses. It was the cloying, metallic smell of fresh blood mixed with the foul stench of ancient mud from a stagnant pond. The scent was so thick it made some people vomit right there. Baho frantically struck the flint. Click, click! A spark flashed for a split millisecond. But that was enough to etch into his retina an image that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Right next to Alu's left shoulder, a pale, bloated face like a drowned corpse was leaning in close. Its eyes were pitch black with no whites, mouth grinning ear to ear, revealing jagged black teeth. It was sticking out a long red tongue, licking a drop of sweat rolling down the young hunter's cheek.
Asung, slash it, right on the left!
Baho screamed. Asung swung his jungle knife hard into the empty space beside him out of reflex.
Thwack!
The blade hit something soft and tough, like chopping into a rotten banana trunk. An ear-piercing shriek rang out. Not human, but like a stray cat stepping on its tail amplified 100 times. Sticky liquid splattered onto the faces of those standing nearby, hot and fishy. Immediately, the crowd broke formation. The hunters lost all reason, struggling to escape invisible hands, trampling each other to find a way to live. They no longer knew where the door was, where the wall was, only rushing blindly in extreme panic. The sound of bones cracking, desperate cries for help from someone fallen and being dragged across the floor rang out, mixed with ghostly giggling echoing all around. In that chaotic madness, when the line between life and death became as thin as a hair, the survival instinct of the alpha beast inside Baho rose stronger than ever. He realized that trying to open that thick ironwood main door was useless. It had been tightly sealed by an invisible force. The only way out was not the door, but the weakest point of this temple. Baho recalled the afternoon when the group first entered. He noticed the east wall was penetrated by ancient Bodhi tree roots from outside, creating large cracks running from ceiling to floor.
Follow me, this way!
Baho roared, his voice thundering over the screams, swinging the heavy steel axe he still wore at his hip. He rushed toward the moss-mottled brick wall, putting all his life's strength into the decisive chop.
Crash!
The sharp axe blade plunged into the rotten-fired bricks, sparks flying. The wall, already weak from time and moisture, shook violently. Baho gritted his teeth, yanked the axe handle hard, pulling down a large chunk of plaster.
Break it open! Hurry!
Asung and two others understood, rushing in using gun stocks and sticks to ram hard into the crack Baho just created. Crash, rumble. After the third ram, a large section of the wall collapsed outward, creating a jagged hole as big as a winnowing basket. Immediately, cold wind and forest rain rushed in from outside, slapping the faces of those trapped inside. The smell of natural moist air was now more precious to them than anything, chasing away the pungent stench of death inside the temple.
Get out! Run!
As soon as the hole appeared, the crowd was like rats fleeing a broken nest, frantically pushing each other to squeeze through the narrow gap. No more order, no more brotherhood. The strong stepped on the weak. Those behind grabbed the clothes of those ahead to pull them back and climb up. Cursing, crying, and the sound of tearing fabric rang out in chaos. Sharp brick edges cut into flesh, drawing blood, but no one cared about the pain. They just wanted to escape this hell on earth. Baho was the last one intending to crawl out, but just as half his body leaned out of the hole, a cold hand from the darkness behind suddenly grabbed his ankle tight. He whipped around, and that scene would haunt him until death. Behind, in the thick night of the main hall, 3 unlucky hunters left behind were screaming in despair. They couldn't run. Something huge, distorted black shadows was pinning them down. One was being dragged across the floor toward the rear palace, his 10 fingertips clawing the brick floor until bleeding, leaving 10 long red streaks. He looked up with bulging, pleading eyes toward Baho, mouth moving, "Help! Help me!" But before the words finished, a pitch-black hand from the darkness clamped over his mouth and yanked him backward hard.
Crack!
The dry sound of breaking bone rang out, followed by the sudden silence of that person. The other 2 also slowly sank into the darkness, their cries for help turning into choked gurgles as if being drowned. Baho shuddered, kicked hard against the wall to rip his ankle free from the invisible hand, then rolled onto the soaked grass outside. As soon as the last person escaped, the hole in the wall they just crawled through suddenly filled itself up. Broken bricks, plaster fragments, as if possessed by magic, flew up and pieced themselves together. In the blink of an eye, the wall returned to being intact as if never broken, locking tight the 3 humans and those ghostly things inside. Outside, rain was still pouring heavily. 12 humans lay scattered on the muddy ground, breathing hard, eyes vacant, staring at the cold brick wall that had just swallowed their comrades. Dawn came slowly and heavily, as if the sun itself hesitated to shine down on this cursed land. When the first weak rays of sunlight pierced the dense forest canopy, the 12 survivors still sat huddled by a stream about 2 miles from the temple. Their clothes were tattered, covered in mud and dried blood, their faces gaunt and vacant like those just returned from the dead. Waiting until the sun was high above the pole, dispelling the dense fog, Baho finally dared to order everyone to return. Although fear remained intact in their chests, responsibility for the 3 missing brothers forced them to face the truth, no matter how cruel. They traced their own tracks left last night, broken branches, footprints slipped in young mud. But when they arrived, a scene made them all stand rooted to the spot. No one could utter a word. There was no temple at all. At the spot where the imposing Koam 2 stood last night with brick walls, curved tiled roofs and bat-trang brick courtyard, now was just a desolate wasteland, weeds growing taller than a person's head. All that remained were shattered blue stone foundations, scattered among uneven mounds of earth. A stone stele broken in two lay neglected, covered in moss, faintly showing a few worn-out carved characters. Where were we last night?
Heavens.
A sung asked, trembling, pointing to the middle of the wasteland. There, right in the center of the ruins, traces of the campfire they lit last night remained intact. Half-burnt logs lay lonely on the damp ground, surrounded by chaotic footprints trampling the weeds. This proved they did not dream. They really sat there, really experienced that horrifying night. Only that the temple surrounding them last night was just an illusion, or the soul of an architecture dead for hundreds of years reappearing to trap prey. Baho walked around the ruins, hoping to find some trace of the three missing people, but there was nothing. No bodies, no drag marks of blood, not even a scrap of cloth. They seemed to have evaporated completely into thin air, swallowed by the invisible mouth of the past. But then a terrified scream from Alu rang out from the edge of the forest surrounding the ruins. Look at the trees! Everyone ran over hurriedly. Before their eyes, dozens of ancient trees surrounding the wasteland. Huge trees they thought were normal old forest last night. All bore hair-raising marks. From the roots up to 3 meters high, the rough bark was shredded to pieces. Tree sap oozed out red as fresh blood, coagulating into clots. These scratches were not from animal claws, but from human fingernails. Thousands, tens of thousands of fingernail scratches cut deep into the wood grain, crisscrossing frantically. Baho approached an old oak tree. He narrowed his eyes, examining the intricate scratches. His heart tightened when he realized they were not random scratches. They were arranged intentionally, forming distorted, strange characters. Those were lines of scripture. The grotesque scriptures they heard in the chanting last night, now carved thickly onto the tree trunks by the fingernails of the ill-fated victims, and more horribly embedded deep in a crack of the trunk. Baho saw a torn-off human fingernail, covered in blood and wood splinters. Mountain wind suddenly rose, blowing through the shredded canopy. The wind whistling through the gaps in the bark created a humming, low sound. Rum, rum, rum. That was not the wind. That was chanting. The hunting party fled for their lives down the mountain, no one daring to look back again. They left Vong Lin mountain range forever, carrying the obsession that would haunt their every sleep until the end of their lives. From then on, the people of Than Khe village whispered to each other that, on stormy nights, if anyone got lost deep in Vong Lin mountain, they would hear the temple bell echoing from the void, and the chanting for salvation of souls that never found peace, trying to claw at the walls of time to find a way back to the living world.